Book 1. One of the central themes of this book is that learning has more to do with actual behavior than academic theory, and that virtuous public behavior as an adult is rooted in such basic familial virtues as filial piety and respect for elders. The master said, to learn and then have the occasion to practice what you have learned. Is this not satisfying to have friends arrive from afar? Is this not a joy? To be patient even when others do not understand. Is this not the mark of gentlemen? As Cheng Shure notes, people today think of learning as the pursuit of knowledge, whereas the ancients thought of learning as cultivating the self. For evidence, he points to 6.3, where Confucius cites Yan Hui as the only one of his disciples that truly loved learning because he never misdirected his anger and never repeated a mistake twice, and 2.17, where learning is described in terms of seldom erring in one's speech and seldom having cause for regret in one's behavior. This is an important point. We will see through the text that the sort of learning Confucius is interested in is a practical kind of know-how rather than abstract theoretical knowledge. Li Chong explains that the three activities mentioned in 1.1 refer to the stage of learning: mastering the basics, discussing discussing them with fellow students and working hard at mastering them, and finally, becoming a teacher of others. Master Yu said, a young person who is filial and respectful of his elders rarely becomes the kind of person who is inclined to defy his superiors, and there has never been a case of one who is disinclined to defy his superiors stirring up rebellion. The gentleman applies himself to the roots. Once the roots are firmly established, the way will grow. Might we not say that filial piety and respect for elders constitute the root of goodness? The line enclosed in quotation mark is probably a traditional saying. A comment upon this passage found in the Garden of Persuasions reads, if the roots are not straight, then the branches will necessarily be crooked, and if the beginning doesn't flourish, then the end will necessarily wither. And Oda says, the highlight and lowlands have been pacified, the springs and streams have been made clear. Once the roots are firmly established, the way will grow. The quoted Ode is a variant of the extant Ode 227. We see from the common Confucian theme that political order grows naturally out of the moral character formed within the context of family life. As Chan Tingxiang notes, we find a similar theme in Mencius 4a11. If everyone simply loved their parents and respected their elders, the world would be at peace. The master said, a clever talk and fine appearance are rarely signs of goodness. This suspicion of glib speech and superficial appearance is found through the Analects. This saying is repeated in 17.7 below, and in 15.11 the anger presented by glib people is compared to the derangement of morals brought about by the music of Zhang. David Nevision has made a very interesting observation that may explain Confucius' hatred for this clever, integrating people in archaic Chinese. Ning was pronounced Niang and is actually a graphic modification of its cognate Ran. The original meaning of Ran was something like noble in form, and it would appear that Ning was its counterpart in the verbal realm, attractive or noble in speech. In giving Ning a negative meaning in the Analects, Confucius derives a wedge between the two qualities. Ran now becomes true nobleness or virtue, whereas Ning represent the false, external counterfeit of Ren. This is no doubt the sentiment behind such passage as 12.3, the good person is sparing of speech, and 13.27, reticence is close to the goodness, as well as Confucius' general suspicion of language and outward show. Master Zheng said, every day I examine myself on three counts. In my dealings with others, have I in any way failed to be dutiful? In my interactions with friends and associates, have I in any way failed to be trustworthy? Finally, have I in any way failed to repeatedly put into practice what I teach? Here again, we find the emphasis on practice, actual social behavior, as opposed to academic, theoretical knowledge. The sort of innocent self-examination practiced by Master Zheng no doubt informs his observation in 8.7 that the burden is heavy and the way is long, for the importance of introspection. The master said, to guide a state of 1,000 chariots, be respectful in your handling of affairs and display trustworthiness. Be frugal in your expenditures and cherish others, and employ the common people only at the proper times. A great deal of commentarial ink has been spilled over the question of exactly how large a state of 1,000 chariots is, but for our purposes it suffices to note that it's not small. Employing the common people refers to the use of peasants, farmers in public work projects, which will be timed so as to not interfere with their agricultural activities. Early texts suggest that the levy should not exceed 3 days in a year, as Brooks note. The description doesn't imply a minister leading state, but a middle administrator, dutiful toward his superiors, thoughtful of his junior colleagues, and appropriate in his demands on the subject population. The master said, a young person should be filial when at home, and respectful of his elders when in public. Conscientious and trustworthy, he should display a general care for the masses, but feel a particular affection for those who are good. If he has any strength left over after manifesting these virtues in practice, let him devote it to learning the cultural arts. There is some debate about how to understand the term "van" here, but it most likely refers to a set of cultural practices such as those later formalized as so-called six arts of ritual, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and mathematics, in which any cultured person was trained. Liu Bainan notes that the purpose of this passage is to emphasize that manifesting filial piety and respect for elders in one's behavior is the primary concern, while the study of cultural arts is secondary. As Yin Tun puts it, virtuous behavior is the root, while the cultural arts are the branches. Only by exhausting both root and branches and knowing which is primary and which is secondary can one enter into virtue. This theme is reinforced in 1.7 below. Zixia said, imagine someone who recognizes and admires worthiness and therefore changes his lustful nature, who is able to fully exhaust his strength in serving his parents and extend himself to the utmost in serving his Lord, and who is trustworthy in speech when interacting with friends and associates. Even if you said of such a person, oh, but he is not learned, I will still insist that it is precisely such qualities that make one worthy of being called learned. Many commentators believe the first line to be reference to proper relations between the sexes, which makes the four qualities mentioned map nicely to the four great human relationship: husband-wife, child-parent, minister-lord, and friend-friend. As Yozo explains, During the three dynasties, learned has solely to do with eliminating human relations. One able to master the four relationships can be said to have a deep understanding of human relations. In learning this as the way, can anything be added to it? Zixia was famous for his culture and learning, so to have him speaking like this gives us a good sense of what the ancient meant when they spoke of learning. Alternately, Yize could also be understood as thinking lightly of physical appearance. The master said, if a gentleman is not serious, he will not inspire awe, and what he learns will be grasped only superficially. Let your actions be governed by dutifulness and trustworthiness, and do not accept as a friend one who is not your equal. If you have committed a transaction, do not be afraid to change your ways. Seriousness seems here to refer to kind of genuine emotional commitment to the Confucian way. Kong Ango reports the opinion that what this means is that if one is not able to be sincere and serious, one will lack a demeanor that will inspire respect in others and will also be unable to firmly grasp the underlying ethical principles of what the one is taught. In the second half, we see again the emphasis upon improving one's actual behavior in one's interaction with others. The sentiment that one shouldn't accept a friend who is not one's equal might seem a bit puzzling or even offensive to someone not acquainted with the idea of character friendship in the Aristotelian sense, but what Confucius meant by a friend here is a person who shares one's moral aspirations. One is to compare oneself with other people in general in order to evaluate one's moral progress. But the fellowship provided by a friend in virtue combines a powerful spur to further moral development with a deeply felt solidity of purpose, an important solace during the long and arduous process of self-cultivation. As Confucius explains in 1510, the practice of goodness is like learning a craft, and one sharpens one's tools by seeking out the company of like-minded souls. Similarly, a true friend in virtue serves as a support and comfort. The gentleman relies upon his friend for support in becoming good. Master Zheng said, take great care in seeing of the deceased and sedulously maintain the sacrifices to your distant ancestors, and the common people will sincerely return to virtue. The target audience for the saying seems to be rulers or potential rulers, the message being that the key to ordering the state is paying attention to one's own behavior, a theme often repeated in books 12 and 13 below. As Cheng Shure observes, by the time of spring and autumn period, education in ritual had sadly declined and cruelty to one's parents had become prevalent among the common people. Therefore, Master Zheng rebuked those in power by noting that if they would merely take care in seeing of their deceased and sedulously maintain the sacrifices to their distant ancestors, the common people would naturally become aware of their own meanness and be moved to return the kindness. As the record of ritual says, cultivate the ancestral temples, respectfully perform the ancestral sacrifices, and thereby teach the common people to maintain filial piety. Ziqian asked Zigong, when our master arrives in a state, he invariably finds out about its government. Does he actively seek out this information? Surely it's not simply offered to him. Zigong answered, our master obtains it through being cautious, refined, respectful, restrained, and differential. The master's way of seeing it is entirely different from other people's way of seeking it. Is it not? Huang Kang believes the point of this passage to be that the quality of rulership in a state is revealed in the sentiment of common people, to which Confucius was particularly sensitive because of his virtuous nature. Rulers thus give away this information inadvertently to one as attuned as Confucius, who therefore doesn't have to make inquiries in the ordinary fashion. Zhu Xi believes that it is the rulers who, drawn by the power of master's virtue, actively seek Confucius or to discuss the problems of governance. In any case, the point seems to be that Confucius sought it in himself, not the others, or that the sage seeks things by means of virtue, unlike ordinary people who seek things with their minds. That is, while ordinary people consciously and deliberately pursue external goals, the sage focuses his attention upon his inner virtue and allows external things to come to him naturally. Confucius doesn't actively pry or seek out information, but is so perfected in virtue that what he seeks comes to him unbidden in a wu-wei fashion. The master said, when someone's father is still alive, observe his intentions after his father passed away, observe his conduct. If for 3 years he doesn't alter the ways of his father, he may be called a filial son. 3 years, usually understood as into the third year or 25 months, is the standard mourning period for a parent. As Kang Angu explains, when his father is still alive, the son is not able to act as he wants, because he must obey the father's commands. So one can only observe his intentions in order to judge his character. It is only when his father has passed away that the son can learn about his character by observing his own actions. As long as the filial son is in mourning, his sorrow and longing is such that it is as if the father were still present, and this is why he doesn't alter the ways of his father. Yin Tun clarifies, if the ways of his father are in accordance with the way, it will be perfectly acceptable to go his entire life without changing them. If they are not in accordance with the way, though, why does he wait 3 years to change them? Even in the latter case, the filial son goes 3 years without making any changes because his heart is blocked by a certain reluctance. In this passage, we see hints of priority given to familial affection and loyalty over considerations of what is more abstractly right, that is expressed more strictly in 1318. Master Yu said, when it comes to practice of ritual, it is harmonious ease that is to be valued. It is precisely such harmony that makes the way of the former kings so beautiful. If you merely stick rigidly to ritual in all matters, great and small, there will remain that which you can't accomplish. Yet, if you know enough to value harmonious ease, but try to attain it without being regulated by the rites, this will not work either. What it means to practice ritual with harmonious ease is illustrated in the description of Confucius' ritual behavior in Book 10. Ritual behavior must be accompanied by such easy joy and harmony if it is to be truly valued. On the other hand, such ease involves more than simply indulging one's innate emotions. The innate emotions must be properly shaped by ritual's form before they can become truly harmonious. The message here is related to the theme of possessing both native substance and cultural refinement in their proper balance. Master Yu said, trustworthiness comes close to rightness, in that your word can be counted upon. Reverence comes close to ritual propriety, in that it allows you to keep shame and public disgrace at a distance. Simply following these virtues, never letting them out of your sight, one cannot deny that this is worthy of respect. Described here are secondary virtues that allow one to live a respectable life, but that lack of flexibility and subtlety of the primary virtues. In explaining why trustworthiness is only close to the rightness, Louis Bainon cites Mencius 4b11. The great person is not always necessarily true to his word, because he is concerned only with rightness, explaining that trustworthiness must be always be practiced with an eye toward what is right. Huang Kang illustrates the potential tension between trustworthiness and rightness with the story of legendary paragon of trustworthiness, Wei Sheng, who once promised to meet a girl under a river bridge, come hell or high water. Unfortunately, there was a great storm the next day, and the high water did come. The girl stayed at home, but Wei Sheng obstinately refused to abandon the appointed meeting place and so was drowned. This is an example of trustworthiness not according with what's appropriate to the situation, where in fact it will be best if one didn't keep one's word. Huang Kang concludes. Similarly, the feeling of reverence, although the root of ritual property, can in its raw form motivate actions that do not accord with the subtly tuned dictates of ritual property. The master said, "The gentleman is not motivated by the desire for a full belly or a comfortable abode. He is simply scrupulous in behavior and careful in speech, drawing near to those who possess the way in order to be set straight by them. Surely this and nothing else is what it means to love learning." We see here the first expression of a theme that will be repeated through the Analects. The true lover of the way is not concerned with externalities such as fine, abundant food or other material comforts. The general theme of Book 1, that learning pertains to one's actual department rather than to theoretical knowledge, is also reinforced, as Wang Shu comments. The primary focus of students in ancient times was to cultivate themselves by being meticulous in speech and careful in action, rather than merely memorizing, reciting, and composing texts. Students nowadays, on the other hand, devote themselves exclusively to memorizing, reciting, and composing texts with the sole purpose of passing the civil service exams and obtaining official positions. Very few of them ever get around to paying careful attention to their actual behavior or speech. Perhaps this is why they pale in comparison to the ancients. For the importance of being careful with regard to one's speech, 2:13, 4:22, 4:24, 12:3, 14:20, and 14:27 chapter. Zigong said, "Poor without being obsequious, rich without being arrogant. What would you say about someone like that?" The master answered, "This is acceptable, but it's still not as good as being poor and yet joyful, rich and yet loving ritual." Zigong said, "Another says, as if cut, as if polished, as if carved, as if ground. Is this not what you have in mind?" The master said, "Zigong, you are precisely the kind of person with whom one can begin to discuss the others. Informed as to what has gone before, you know what it come. Cutting and polishing refer to working of bone and ivory, while carving and grinding refer to jade work. Cutting and carving being the initial rough states, and polishing and grinding the finishing touches. Here the task of self-cultivation is understood metaphorically in terms of arduous process of roughly shaping and then laboriously finishing recalcitrant materials. Zigong's quotations of this ode shows that he has instantly grasped Confucius' point explained quite nicely by Zhu Xi. Ordinary people became mired in poverty or wealth, not knowing how to be self-possessed in such circumstances, necessarily leading to the two faults of obsequiousness or arrogance. A person who is able to be free of both knows and how to be self-possessed, but has still not reached to the point of completely transcending poverty and wealth. When a person is joyful, he is relaxed in his mind and physically at ease, and therefore forgets about poverty. When he loves ritual, he is at peace wherever he goes and follows principles in a cheerful, good natured fashion, by being equally unconscious of wealth. Zigong was a businessman, probably starting out poor and then becoming rich, and therefore had to exert effort to remain self possessed. This is why he asked this particular question. The master's answer was probably intended to acknowledge what Zigong had already achieved, while at the same time encouraging him to continue striving after what which he had yet to attain. Zhu Xi also noted that Zigong's quotations reveals not only that he has grasped Confucius' specific point that Zigong, still has quite a bit of finishing work to do, but also serves as a general statement of the Confucian view of self-cultivation, that one should not be so satisfied with small achievements that one fails to urge oneself on. This instead grasping of the larger point to be taught in excellent example of a student being given three corners of his square and coming up with the fourth. The master said, "Do not be concerned about whether or not others know you, be concerned about whether or not you know others." The first half of this saying refers to the need to be unconcerned about public opinion or fame. The gentleman studies for his own sake, not in order to impress others, and seeks for it in himself, not in others. Commentators generally explains the second half as having to do with the ability morally judge others. Also compare this passage with 12:20, 14:30.